Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. My name is Paul. Today I'm joined by Ken and Ian, and we are your marketing guides. So, Google makes about 4,500 changes to its search algorithm every year. Now, that includes, search, local search, organic search, uh, user interface, but it's a lot of changes that are made. And there are about 149 potential ranking factors for local search. Obviously, some have more impact than others. So that's what we're going to talk about today, at least the more important ones. We're not going to talk about all 149. So this might be a two-part series. There's a lot to talk about here. So Ken, I'll start with you. We could probably group these local ranking factors into 7 buckets, if you will. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, um, when we're talking about local rankings, I mean, you need to think about what triggers those, right? And so it's usually, uh, you know, type of business near me, kind of a search, or type of business plus the city or the location you're in is going to generate the local search algorithm to kick in and deliver the search results. And so, really the 7 buckets that I see that are out there have to do with your Google business profile and how it ranks. Google clearly states, proximity, relevance, and prominence are 3 really important things. Proximity is, Google is going to ask you for an address when you set up your business profile. Doesn't mean that it's published, but that address is where it drops the pin and uses that as a radius or a pin marker basically. And so proximity diminishes the farther away you get in radius typically, in terms of ranking or effectiveness for ranking, unless you take some extra steps to address that. Relevance is really all of the information that your Google business profile can figure out, as it relates to every other website that's out there, including your website. What content's on your website? What other websites are you listed on? How Google uses all of that to kind of factor in that relevance part of the score. Prominence. Prominence deals with reviews predominantly. What's your composite ranking? How many reviews do you have? What's your frequency of getting new reviews? Are you responding to reviews? All that kind of stuff. So those are 3 big things that Google clearly specifies. These are important. The other things that you need to think about are your primary categories. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are out there that honestly they pick really crappy categories that aren't the right ones for their business. And you need to think about, your business Google business profile. You're going to have to pick one because you can only have one primary. You can have, a couple more secondary, but you can only have one primary. So if you do windows, siding, roofs, kitchen and bath remodel, decks, fences, you're going to have to pick one. It could be general contractor, it could be deck builder, it could be roofing contractor, but you're going to have to pick one of them, and that's where you're going to get the most traction in terms of a category. Again, you can have secondary categories, but you don't want to go crazy with those either. And then, if you do happen to have a keyword in your business name, that helps, but you never want to artificially represent your business by creating a false business name by tacking on, you know, you know, Billy Bob's Roofing Company is great because roofing company is in the phrase, but if it's just uh, Billy Bob's and Associates, and then you tack on dash roofing contractors, and that's not the real legitimate name of your business, that's probably not going to be I would not recommend that course. So a lot about the Google business profile. It's obviously huge. Um, the other thing to keep in mind is, it's what's going to help you show up in the Google map results, right? And so 60 to 70% of all clicks or calls happen from Google Maps. So being listed there is incredibly important. That is not enough to get you to rank locally for search for most businesses, most niches, in most markets. So what you have to do is you have to work on the stuff on your website as well, and it has to complement and support your Google business profile, uh, and really feed it and legitimize it for the map rankings. And so you do that. The first bucket for that would be on-page signals that you create. Is your name, address, phone number information on your website in the right place? I mean, I recommend the footer. Do you have structured data and markup? Because that's going to help reinforce your name, address, phone number, as well as a whole host of other things. The title tags, your domain authority. If you bought a brand new URL and you just started using it 6 months ago, you're not going to have a lot of domain authority yet. It takes time to build that up, and it takes help from other websites linking to your website to build up your domain authority. So you have to be realistic about that. But you want to do the basic blocking and tackling here, making sure that all pictures have alt tags on them. Making sure that you structure the content on each and every page, 500 words per page, using the H1, H2, H3 structure, the heading structures properly, so that Google can actually effectively crawl that content. Bucket number 3, review signals, both from Google, your Google business profile, but also third-party review sites, especially if they're relevant to your niche. So Yelp is a great general category, for pretty much all businesses. But then if you're in real estate or the legal profession, you're going to be dealing with like Realtor.com or Avvo or sites like that may allow people to write reviews. Those are going to be very important because they're contextually relevant. We talked about reviews in regard to Google Business Profile. Your review velocity is actually really important. If your most recent review is 6 months old or older, it probably isn't carrying a whole lot of review juice for you anymore. Google wants to see a constant, steady stream of new reviews coming in. You don't want to go crazy. You don't want to have a gazillion reviews artificially or prompted reviews even. I don't want to use the word artificial because that makes it sound like you're doing something hinky. But if you go ask somebody to write a review and you ask 100 people and they all go do it at the same time, you're gonna potentially face some scrutiny, because that's not a normal process unless you're in a business where it's high volume. If you're an auto repair shop, if you're a restaurant, you may get 5 to 10 reviews per day, depending on how many clients you have coming in. Google pays attention to all of that, and so you definitely want to focus on that. If you don't have a composite review rating of 4.2 or higher, you need to get it above 4.2. That seems to be kind of the breaking point where people are like, yeah, there are businesses that are rated considerably higher than this one. This one's not, I don't know why it's 4.2, but it seems like that's really kind of the demarcation line of when people start to lose trust and faith in a business. So if you're below 4.2, you need to work on your reviews. Bucket number 4, link signals. So how are you indicating to Google the links to internal pages on your website? We talk about this in terms of using inbound anchor text. And so you can, you don't have a whole lot of control over that because those are on external sites, but you can certainly control the internal linking that you do within your website. And that's very important. And you use anchor text, meaning good keyword phrases. That's what you hyperlink on the page itself, that signals to Google, here's something that's important that I need to follow and kind of chase through. And if it's relevant and related, it's going to reinforce the overall SEO of your site. When we're talking about external links, we're talking about, from other websites. Are they relevant, both geographically and as well as topically or category wise or relevancy? And then also the domain authority, which is really a number that's assigned by the search engines in terms of the importance and credibility and trustworthiness of that website based on its history and amount of content. I mean, there are tons of factors that go in there. But if high domain authority websites are linking to your website, they carry a lot more impact than a very low authority domain authority website, as long as it's relevant. And so you need to factor that in. Bucket number 5 is going to be behavioral signals. So what are people doing when they are on your site? Are they staying on your site? Are they sticking around on pages? Are they navigating through from one page to the next? Are they clicking on buttons or, making phone calls, by clicking through click to call type numbers that are on your website? Bounce rate, we've talked about that in the past. I mean, that's not the most relevant statistic because it can give you a lot of misleading data. But the more important thing is dwell time. What are people doing when they get on your site? Are they tending to stick around, staying on a page for a while, going to other pages? That's the signal you really want. The citations. So citations are they're similar to links in respect that they send signals back from external websites back to your website to verify predominantly the name, address, phone number information. And they carry location data and implications that, this business is located in this area, serving this area, which is obviously incredibly important for local search. The number of citations does have an impact. The consistency of your name, address, phone number, while it may not be as hot of and a high a priority item as maybe it was 3 years ago, I still think it's important. And look, my philosophy is don't give the search engines any reason to doubt your business, and don't give customers any bad data unnecessarily about your business. If you're listed on a citation and that happens to be how they find out about your business and they click on it and your business hours are wrong, you're going to lose business. So even though it may not have a huge impact on your SEO because of the nature of that citation, it's costing you business, and those people may never come back. So name, address, phone number consistency is, I still think it's a very important thing. And I think every business should be focused on that if they're trying to rank well for local search. The last is just, related to kind of personalization. So, what is somebody's search history? If they visited your website before, that's, if they haven't cleared their cache and they're logged in to Chrome as their browser, for example, it's, Google's going to remember, if they're doing a Google search, that they've been on that page before. So that's going to bias search results a little bit. Where somebody happens to be located when they're doing a search, especially if they're on a mobile device, can have a really big impact. But regardless of whether you're on mobile or desktop or laptop, your search location does play a role in local search results. And like I said, your device. I mean, if you're on your mobile and you've got your GPS settings turned on, you're going to get the search results delivered that are closest to you, because that's really the nature of local search on a mobile device.
Yeah, the personalization part of it, that's not something you have any control over, but it is something that search engines do look at, like you said, as long as they haven't cleared their cache.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like when somebody lands on a web page and there are personalization features that can actually pull in somebody's name to say, hey, welcome, Ian. When they land on that web page. That's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking, more about, the individual person's search history and devices that they're using and proximity.
So, Ian, local search factor group weighting, as in weight, WEIGHT, can not WAIT. So, can you talk about the different weight signals applied from these 7 groups as they apply to the local pack finder and local organic, and some of the changes that we've seen over time? And maybe you can start by explaining what's the difference between the local pack and local organic.
For sure.
Long
Yeah.
answer.
So, what's that? Well,
Long answer.
So just so our listeners understand the difference between the local pack and the local organic results, it's often called, the local pack is often called the 3-pack in Google. And the reason that is, first of all, I'll explain what it is, and then I'll tell you the reason we call it 3-pack. It's pretty self-evident. But when you do a Google search, so say you're in New York and you're looking for a dentist. New York's a big city, so that might not be specific enough, but the GPS will, if your GPS is turned on, it'll, just like Ken said, we'll find the proximity one close to you, but it will come up with ads in your search results. It'll come up with the map listings. And in the map listings, usually it's in a box, and it's got map listings. It's usually got 3 results. There's usually a 4th one, which is an ad at the top of those results. But the reason we call it the 3-pack is because if you can make it into those 3, you get high visibility in those map listings in search results. So that's the local pack. And then the local organic is what follows the local pack. And that is your standard organic search results that websites have earned to be ranked in the top of that search related to what you entered into Google. So hopefully that explains it well enough for people, that there's different elements, kind of different sections within a Google search result. The first is ads. The second is the local 3-pack, which is your map listings. And then the 4th is your local organic search results, or your broader organic search results. Does that make sense? Did I explain that okay, guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
So local search factor group weighting, and that's the weight of it, the heaviness of it, which one carries more weight than the other. These are in constant fluctuation. I mean, we've seen, over the years, all 3 of us have been doing SEO for a long time now. And we've certainly seen dramatic fluctuations in how, Google puts more weight on some things and less weight on other things. For example, a few years ago, when Google switched to a mobile first algorithm, there was a big upheaval in what things were weighted for mobile search results. Another big example of that is when Google started to put a very heavy weight on reviews for local search results. And so those are just a couple examples, but and I want to direct people a really great resource. If you really are data driven, you want to understand, where some of this information comes from, a really great resource is WhiteSpark. Is a great research company. They also have some services or software that you can subscribe to, but they do research on an ongoing basis. And because they're aggregating tons of data from all their users, they have some really good research and data and insights into what's currently happening on local search. And so they have a really great resource that anybody can just go to. So do a search for WhiteSpark, and I believe it is called the 2023 local search ranking factors. So that's a really great article that you can dig into the data a little bit more detailed than what we can go into on this podcast. But when we look at the local pack and we start to look at the weighted ranking factors, It's really fascinating, actually, because again, we've been in the business long enough to have seen some dramatic upheavals. But the number one ranking factor right now, and Ken mentioned this when he was giving the overview of the different factors, was your primary Google Business Profile category. So you have to really, really select that carefully. When we're doing audits for clients or even prospective clients, it is amazing how often we'll see a prospect or a client who's recently come on board with us where the category just doesn't make sense. Like, yes, it's a peripheral or on the periphery of what they do, but why would you choose that as your primary category when really the bulk of the business you're trying to attract is something else? So we see lots of that in the trades. We see lots of that in financial services. Like if you're an accountant, but you do bookkeeping and you do consulting, right? A lot of people will choose business consultant as their primary category, but really the people they're trying to attract are accounting. They want to be showing up for accounting searches, right? So you really have to choose that carefully. The second highest ranking factor right now, and again, like these change all the time. So, in at least a year, there's going to be another upheaval, I'm sure, but these will probably fluctuate even in 2023. But keywords in your GBP business title. So Ken talked about the danger of basically trying to game that title, your business title. But if your business title actually has legitimate keywords in it, that is super powerful from a Google standpoint. But you can't game the system. If you game the system, you will be suspended eventually. And you don't want to lose that because this is a really great conduit for new business. Ken talked about the proximity of your address to the point of the search. That's number 3. Number 4 is your physical address in the city of the search. So as an example, if you're a dentist and you're on the outskirts of a town, you will not have the same power as a dentist in the heart of that town. If somebody is searching for a dentist in that town, that's just the physical address actually plays a big part. Removal of spam listings. This can happen. We saw a lot of this actually in 2022, where Google's algorithm was actually flagging. There was thousands and thousands of businesses that were unfortunately caught up in this net of spam listings, and they lost or were at least suspended. Their Google Business Profile was suspended, and so that's a huge ranking factor, right? If you actually get classified as spam, that's really going to hurt you. But it also helps you if illegitimate Google Business Profiles in your area are flagged as spam. That'll just mean there's less fish in the sea to compete with, right? From a Google Business Profile stand. High numeric Google ratings. So Ken talked about 4.2 being kind of that threshold. Like if the higher your Google rating, the better ranking factor. It just makes sense. Google wants to send people to the most relevant businesses they can, and the more satisfied customers that are showing up as reviews and helping your overall Google review rating is going to help your business. Additional Google Business Profile categories. Again, Ken talked about how you have a primary category, but you can also build out, I believe the last time I looked, it was like 10. I think you could do 10 additional categories. And why wouldn't you do that? Again, using the example of, a financial services business, if you are primarily an accountant, but you do bookkeeping, you do tax preparation, you do business consulting, all of those could be subordinate or additional Google Business Profile categories, which will help you. It won't help you usually beat out somebody with that as a primary category, but it will help you show up for those if they're, again, with people that aren't using those as primary categories. Quantity of native Google reviews. With text, not blank reviews, because we see that an awful lot where people will just say, yes, 5-star. Boom, I did what they asked me to do, right? And yes, 5 stars is better than nothing. But when people actually add text to their reviews, it helps Google understand what their experience was, and it also helps them show up better when people are, if you're looking for a specific thing, and people are notating that in the text of the Google reviews, that will actually help you show up better. Verified Google Business Profile. It's not. This used to be standard practice. I'm noticing that Google doesn't. The verification isn't as onerous as it used to be. If anybody's been doing this for a while, they'll remember where Google would send you a postcard in the mail, and you had to wait. Oh, it was like 3 to 12 weeks sometimes it would take, and you'd just be in this limbo where you may have optimized the Google Business Profile and set it up to the max, but it's just sitting there and not going public until Google verified it. Now they've improved that. Usually it's either a phone verification or something like that, sometimes even a text verification. And because Google's got their hands in a lot of different data, they can often even verify it through other sources. So it's not as onerous as it used to be. And then, I mean, there's 149 factors, but though I think if you, I talked about 9 there, and I think if you got those done, and if you maximize your Google Business Profile, because the cool thing too is Google's getting smarter at this too, and so it'll actually tell you when you go into your Google Business Profile section in the search results, it'll have a little percentage, a little circle chart of how much you've optimized your profile. And that's the very basic, I would say. I mean, you can keep building out your profile, but if you haven't even gotten it to 100% on Google's view, then you're not optimizing it to the max. And that's going to hurt your ranking factors for sure.
Hey, Ian, I've got a couple of questions.
Yep.
So when you're creating, I mean, when you're putting categories in, especially like secondary, or it could be primary for that matter, you really, do you think you really should be using the Google categories that they've already defined instead of making up one yourself? Because you can do that, but if Google hasn't made that category, then chances, and look, there are some businesses, their categories just don't match.
Yeah.
But you've got to, I mean, if Google's gone to the importance of creating it as a category, do you think you're going to get better mileage using the Google defined category as one you make up yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've used this term for years now. I always say Google loves Google. So if you can fit within Google's world using Google's vernacular of how they want things done, you will always be ahead. Having said that, probably the reason I keep thinking of financial services is because I was just building out a profile for someone that didn't have one recently for a business. And just to your point, they do accounting, they do bookkeeping, they do financial support services, data analytics, that kind of thing. But one of the things that certainly didn't show up as a Google category at the time was fractional CFO, right? And that's a big thing nowadays. Like a lot of accountants are doing that. Right. Even CPA was a hard one to find on some of, I don't think there was a primary category for that, if I remember right. So it's still, choose the ones that Google can provide. But then I would say, if you have a very valuable service that Google isn't showing, certainly put it in there. Like that just makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. The other question I had was about the address.
Yeah.
Google has very specific guidelines that a lot of people violate all the time in terms of what is an acceptable business address. Yeah. And folks, it's not a virtual office. It's not a PO box. It's not a UPS store, whatever equivalent you might have in Canada. They want a real physical address where you can receive mail. And oftentimes they will make you prove it by sending a picture where you have a sign out front or submitting a utility bill to prove that you're getting business mail at that address. So a lot of people game the system. You talked about, the spam listings, and there are a ton of spam listings. Sure, you might be able to create one. You may even be able to get away with it for quite a while, but you're going to get whacked eventually. And Google has started to, and there are also now professionals that specialize in finding and, notifying, Google all of the spam listings that are out there, because it's become such an important problem that, people are actively doing that as a service.
Yeah. And you have to remember too, like not that everybody, I'd say a very small percentages of businesses do this type of activity, but we as just users of Google can report a business as spam, right? So you need to remember, like if you're out competing a competitor and you have an obvious spam listing, they can report it as spam, which is going to, all of a sudden it's like the Eye of Sauron, right? Like, if you're Ian's science fiction taste comes out in there with Lord of the Rings, but all of a sudden you're in its zone and it's got its eyeball on you, and you don't want that. Just to give you a really brief example, we didn't do the Google Business Profile for this client, but we built their website. It's been performing extremely well in their area. And then all of a sudden they reached out to us and they said, hey, can you help us figure out our Google Business Profile has been suspended. We don't know why. They gave me access. I started to look around in it, and the only thing I could find that was against Google's policies, because Google has policies, you can look at the policies. So they, if you get suspended, they'll give you a link. You go to the link, it'll tell you what the policies are. They're not always really that easy to understand a lot of times. But what was easy to understand was that this particular client did not. So there, you can show your address in a Google Business Profile, which will actually put a pin on the map. You can also choose to be a service area business, where you say, I serve these geographic areas. You still have to provide your actual address of your business, but Google won't show it to the people that are searching. And so this particular client had decided to do kind of a mashup of that, and they chose the street they were on, but didn't provide the actual address. And so it was not a service area business. It was an actual pin that it was showing. And however Google figured it out, they, it's not that hard. There was no number in their address. Google suspended their account, and that was after going through and auditing it. That's what we figured was probably the suspension issue. And all they would have to do is actually add their address in or convert it into a service area listing, and they would have been absolutely fine once they put their address in there. So, but it's an example where that can really, like, this is a seasonal business, and they suddenly lost all of their Google Business Profile power. So they weren't showing up in map listings. They weren't showing up there. They were still showing up in the organic search results because their website was doing well. But this would even hurt their organic results, I think. So, because again, Google's not dumb, and it intermeshes all of the results. So, any other questions, Ken? Those were good questions.
No, I think that's good. I mean, it kind of bleeds into, Google Business Profile optimization, which is a topic that warrants its own podcast for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Ken, what can you talk about what you see as the top ranking factors for local search, like the top 10?
Yeah. So one thing that drives me nuts, absolutely drives me nuts.
Sorry, that's a different podcast, Ken.
Yep, that's we've been doing. Yeah, I think we've already done 4 of those, right? Is the fact that sometimes it's so hard to convince people that you need to have content on your website. Specifically, you need to have content about each and every service. And not only that, it needs to have its own page. Every single product or service you have needs to have its own page. And beyond that, it has to have at least 500 words so that there's enough content to figure out what the heck that page is all about. So we get so much pushback. Ian and I talked about this in our book, Marketing Content for Local Search, which I highly recommend. Shameless plug, but look, I still think it's as relevant today as it was when we wrote it. And we try to give everybody tips on making their life easier from a content creation perspective. But you have to have a dedicated page for every service that you want to rank for. If you don't care about ranking for it, you don't need a page. You might have a paragraph description that oh, by the way, we also offer this service. So if you've got a past customer come and look at your website and wants to hire you because they liked working with you before, they just need to know, oh, okay, yeah, these people do decks too. Okay, great. Yeah, I loved working with them in the past. Maybe that's all they need. They didn't have to find you by search because they remembered their experience. But if you're looking for being found by people who are doing searches, you've got to have a specific page for each and every product or service that you want to rank.
Google can't rank content that doesn't exist.
Exactly. It's not, and it's like, just because you have a bullet point on a page, yeah, right. There are all kinds of bullet points on pages that are completely irrelevant, but people still put them there anyway. So yeah, that's not going to work. Internal linking. So you want to do this as well. And this is where blogging, which is another form of content creation, is just massively important. And I it's so frustrating because I get, people clearly never look at our website. But I bet I get 10 to 20 emails per day for people telling me that they can help me with SEO on my website. Well, that SEO is crap.
And they all come from Gmail accounts or Yahoo accounts.
Exactly. And what they don't realize is that, there's more than just a lot of people when they sign up for SEO, they think on page is what they need. Oh, do you do on page SEO? Well, any credible web designer should be doing that. You need to ask them because they may not, but they should be. But that's not enough. You need internal links, and you can only have internal links to pages that are on your website, linking from one page to another, and they have to be relevant. You have to have content to be able to make that happen. And the best way to do that is through blogs, in my opinion, or podcasts, that you transcribe and link and things like that. Talked about the quality of external links, coming to your website and whether or not they have anchor text in their links. There's no control that you have over that. You're at the mercy, but you can guide that frequently. So like, for example, if you are a guest on a podcast and you were talking about a specific, like fractional CMO or CFO, to use Ian's example, and you're an accountant, you wanted to talk about your fractional CFO experience, you can give the link to the podcast host to your fractional CFO page instead of the main page of your website, so that when they post the show notes and they link, back to you as a guest, they're sending people to the fractional CFO page because that's what you were the guest of the podcast on. So you can have a little bit of control over that sometimes, but most of the time you're the complete mercy of whoever's deciding to link. The geographic related information on your website. Do you talk about the locations that you serve? Are the locations included in the titles and the URLs of the pages or the blog posts that you're creating? That geographic context obviously has huge repercussions for, local search. Duh, right? Pretty obvious, but most people completely skip over it. There's a whole category of pages that need to be created called location or service area or service location pages. I mean, they go by different names, but you got to have that geographically relevant and related content to the areas that you serve. Let's see, Ian. So here's an interesting one. So the actual URL that you put into your Google business profile, it depends on the quality of the page that you're sending people to from your Google business profile. Does it have the location and the main business category of service that you want to rank for? if you in some cases your homepage might already have that. So it could be if your title tag on your website is web designer St. Charles, then you're probably in pretty good shape using your homepage URL if you want to if you want to improve your chances of showing up in local searches, with your Google Business Profile when people are doing searches for web designer in St. Charles. But if you're a national company, maybe you have a location page that talks about the websites and the clients that you have and you've worked with in St. Charles. Maybe that's a better candidate to make for if you're based in St. Charles. Maybe that's the page that you want to send people to and not your homepage. But you've got to have the right content on there for sure.
Yeah, I think that one's actually more relevant for a business that has more than one location.
Yeah, but not necessarily. It depends on, like, if you're, everything has to be looked at in context, right? So I would agree in most cases that's the case. If you've got a dozen locations, you clearly should be, using that location page for your Google Business Profile link for each and every one of those Google profiles that you create, where you have a legitimate business operation. Let's see, again, relevancy in the terms, keyword phrases across the website about the products and services that you deliver. If you're a roofing contractor, hopefully you have a lot of related content, and also this concept of long tail keywords where it's more than just roofing contractor. It's, metal roofing contractor or commercial roofing contractor, or even, longer tail keywords that you might include in like a blog post, blog post title. You want to have that content on your website for sure. We talked about the number of words you need to have on each and every page. Part of that is going to be driven by the competition level, so you need to look and see what are your competitors doing, how much content do they have, how is their overall website ranking, what do you need to do to try to outrank it. There's a lot of work that goes into SEO, even local SEO, which is a subset. It's not just this, oh, hey, for $150 a month, I can do your SEO. Well, they might do some SEO tasks, but they're probably not the ones that are going to be the big difference makers. So.
All right. So, yeah, like content, you have to have, back to internal linking. You can't do internal linking if you don't have content, and internal linking, that helps increase dwell time, which is a ranking factor.
Right.
So, Ian, there's a lot of SEO myths out there. What are some local SEO myths that people should be aware of and pay attention to, and not get, because if you go and do a Google search on local SEO, you'll get all kinds of results that are just wrong.
Yeah. Well, let me start off. I do have a list, but let me start off by sharing, I think, what I see personally as the biggest local SEO myths. And to me, number one is actually all of the spam emails that we all get. Ken talked about getting 20 to 30, a day. I get those too. And I have to think, that low, and that's to businesses that focus on the service that they're spamming you about, right? Oh, I looked at your website and it's horrible and I can help you with your SEO. And you're like, you didn't look at my website, you have no idea. But I think what it does is it puts fear and fear of missing out, right, in a lot of business owners' minds, and even a fear that if they have a current provider that maybe they're not doing what they should be doing. So I think, to me, one of the biggest myths is that, first of all, that somebody who sends you an email from a Gmail account, a Yahoo account, or whatever it is, an unbranded account, who claims that they can get you to page 1 of Google, that's a myth because it's misleading. Anybody can get you to page 1 of Google for keywords that don't matter, right? That's the truth. Is there a kernel of truth in what they're saying? Absolutely. Can they get you to the keywords that actually matter to your business, that are going to attract more customers to you, that are going to build your business? Absolutely not. They can't do that. In fact, I would venture to say that they are snake oil salesmen that just want to land you, and they will not deliver even the idea of what they're presenting to you. So to me, that's probably the biggest myth out there. The other kind of big myth, I would say, is that local SEO is cheap. It's not. It's an investment, just like anything else you're doing. If you want to attract people, say you have a brick and mortar building, you sell carpets or something. If the outside of your building looks crappy and junky and unattractive, old fading signs, I don't know, maybe you have an old carpet sitting out there in a roll that's supposed to attract people, but it's all faded, or, think about, like, everybody who has a business, if they stopped and stood back and looked at their carpet business versus some snazzy is a good word, right? Snazzy looking carpet business that's very attractive, they would see the difference, and they would be like, yeah, I need to invest some money into how I look as a business. And the same is true for your business online. And if you're not investing in it in an ongoing, steady basis, you will not win at this game. And SEO is one of the best investments you can make. It costs money, but it's a great investment. It's not a pay per lead type service, like even what online advertising is. When you stop advertising, poof, all the leads dry up. SEO done right will continue to work for you. And if you continue to invest, it will grow and grow and grow and grow. So that's kind of the big myths, I would say, just to kind of level set everybody. But when we start talking about, like, let's look at local SEO, just very technical things. This one made me chuckle because on the list from Whitespark, one of the top myths was that geotagged photos uploaded to Google Business Profiles is a myth, that actually moves the score for you and raises your rankings a lot. The reason I chuckle, and let me explain what that is. So in a photo, there's metadata behind the photo that you can put in there. You can say, this photo is of a cat on, Holland Street in Bradford, Ontario, or something like that, right? Or better yet, it's my store that sells this product on Holland Street in Bradford, Ontario. And you can actually put in the actual GPS coordinates in there and a host of other data. And we actually have a shared friend in the business who would swear that these actually move the needle in combination with a whole bunch of other factors. And I don't actually, even though this is one of the highest myths, I think if you combine this, and this is one of the thoughts I wanted to share at the end, that even though these are kind of stacked in priority, like these are the highest myths or these are the highest ranking factors, the truth is if you're investing with a good SEO company, they're doing tons of these things, right? Even, all of these things are being done when they build out a Google Business Profile, or when they build out your website in an SEO optimized manner, or when they're optimizing it on an ongoing basis and building a blog post and blah, blah, blah. Number 2 was keywords in your Google Business Profile description. Again, like, why wouldn't you do that? Because your keywords actually align with your services, but it's a myth that that's going to radically move you up in the listings. Number 3, keywords in owner responses to reviews. Again, it's one of those things where I would say, why wouldn't you do it? Thanks for, we're so pleased that you're happy with your dental implants, right? Why wouldn't you add a little bit of specificity to your response? But again, it's not a huge ranking factor. Uh, some of transactions identified through credit card partners. I mean, that's number 4, but that's much more of a product or e-commerce type factor. A Google Business Profile messaging feature is enabled. So some of these myths I think are really relevant in that there's a lot of buzz around SEO and a lot of misinformation. And even stuff we read as experts in the field, we'll read something where somebody will say, hey, if you don't turn on your Google Business Profile messaging, it's going to hurt your rankings, which doesn't really make sense. But there's a little nugget of truth in there that, again, goes back to the idea that Google loves Google. And if you use all of Google's optimization elements within a profile, it's going to help you, right? Keywords in your. So go ahead, Paul.
I think that's that will help with conversions. And like I agree that it's not that right. You wouldn't do a lot of these things.
Yeah.
But are they going to help you rank better? Probably not. It's not that you shouldn't do them, but like the business profile messaging, yeah, you should definitely do that because it's going to help with conversions.
Yeah.
And
that's a very good point.
The geotagged photos a few years ago, that made a difference. I think the reason Google devalued that is that if you have an image editing program, you can go in there and change that geo data to whatever you want. You can have a picture of San Francisco and change the geo data to New York.
Yeah. Yeah. And Google's very good at finding people that game the system, right? And removing the advantage of gaming the system. And I think that's probably one of those things where legitimate geotagging is still fine to do, but gaming it just doesn't help you as much as it might have before. Yeah. And what you were saying, right, is if somebody finds your profile online and you have messaging turned on, that just gives the person another different way of reaching out to you, right? They can go to your website, they can click on that button, they can click on the call button, which is fantastic, or they could click on the messaging button. And not everybody is wired to want to talk to people on the phone. They might be wired to, they want to avoid human interaction as long as possible. And so they might click on that messaging button, which has value. It may not be a huge ranking factor, but as you said, it might be very valuable if you have that option and somebody doesn't, and that particular person is wired in that manner. Quality of Google posts. I thought this was an interesting one. It's almost like Google cares more about it's kind of similar to reviews, I think, where Google likes the velocity and the ongoingness of reviews, right? That you're attracting ongoing reviews. It shows that you're actively selling and that people like you. And I think with the posting, it's kind of similar too, in that Google just likes the activity right now. That might change. Google might get more sophisticated with the quality of the post, but at this point, you should be posting because, again, Google loves Google. You're using the platform the way Google wants you to as a business, and that's just going to help you. But that's a few of them. I mean, the myths go on and on and on, and some of them, some of them are surprising, some of them are a little bit humorous. But I think it's really just you use the platforms that you and the levers that Google gives you the capability to use for your business, and it will help you for sure.
Yeah, one of the just like the messaging feature, if you're in a business where the booking feature is relevant and you have that enabled, some people think that's a ranking factor. Again, it can help with conversions, but it's from a ranking perspective, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, there's another myth that, quite frankly, I've attributed at times, because I still think, I'm just a little cynical of how the world works sometimes, but according to Whitespark, like the connection between Google Ads and Google Organic is almost infinitesimal. Like it may, if you advertise on Google, there may be some benefit. Obviously, the biggest benefit is that you'll show up above the local pack, you'll show up in the organic or the local pack, and then you'll show up at the bottom of organic results, right? So there's obviously a lot of value to it, but sometimes there's the myth that, hey, if I pay some money to Google, that it'll help my organic listings, and there's just no proof attributed to that at least at this point, even though some of us are suspicious. Oh, you're muted, Ken.
Yeah, there's a parade of construction vehicles in my house, or around my house. Yeah, so you're getting relevant traffic, that hopefully is having a meaningful experience when you're driving them from your Google ads. So,
Yeah.
That's got to be picked up, in some way as a signal that people are finding content on your website useful. And likewise, if you're running ads and you're sending people to a page and they're immediately bouncing, you're going to pay more for your ads, and it could potentially, I think, hurt your SEO, even though there's no evidence behind that. And I get why Google would be really careful about that, because they don't want to make it sound like it's a pay to play for SEO.
Yeah.
But still, there's just, when you think about it practically, there's just got to be some value there.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, right? Google Analytics, which is the main platform that most of us in the business would use to track and measure the success of how a website is performing, is a free thing that Google wants every business to attach to a website. And in there, Google's looking at all forms of traffic, from paid to organic to social to referral traffic, right, to direct traffic. And I agree with you, Ken. I can't help but think, like, there's aggregate data, which is like things like dwell time, right? Yes, you can drill down by channel that it comes from or source that it comes from, but still, I think overall, right, if you can increase dwell time and the number of people coming to your website, it's just going to help. It's going to help all aspects, from ads to organic. And of course, organic research, keyword research, is, if you have ads running, that can be a tremendous help to you from an organic side, and vice versa, because you can look at what the results are for keyword searches and how you're performing and how your content is performing. And that can actually feed both sides of it. So super. Yeah, I love your point there.
Yeah.
So any parting thoughts? We're coming up on an hour here. Anything we missed?
Oh, sure.
Well, there's a lot we missed, but
yeah. Well, a couple of things. One is, I want to make it clear that your Google business profile look, it's incredibly important. You don't own or control it at the end of the day. You have the management access to it, but so to rely on that and not have a website, I think, is really foolish. And also, I think your website has a super important role, and I think probably the biggest role, in helping your business profile carry the juice that it has to show up on those Google Map results. The second point I want to make is, just as Ian talked about and I had kind of mentioned as well, don't prejudge SEO and the cost and the value of SEO because you've been burned by somebody who you pay. Look, if you paid hundreds of dollars instead of thousands of dollars, you probably have a bad experience and taste in your mouth from the SEO efforts that were put forth. That's just the reality. It's not for every business, like I said, and not every business needs to make the same level of SEO investment. It depends on competition level. It depends on the type of your business. In some cases, just being proximity alone is going to be almost enough to probably get you there. You always need to have some element of SEO, obviously, but just don't prejudge and don't write it off and say, I tried that, it didn't work. Because as Ian said, it is absolutely the best strategy. It should be seen as an investment. And it drives me nuts because I think I mentioned this, in one of our recent calls. People who own a brick and mortar business, they pay thousands of dollars for rent, and yet they pay practically nothing for their website. And they think that they should be ranking. Why wouldn't you think that you have to pay for something? We don't live in a world that's free. Social media is, sure, you're always going to hear the success story of somebody who knocked it out of the park with social media. That's the exception rather than the norm. If you go to if you go to your national conference, you're going to talk to somebody. Oh yeah, all I do is just social media posting, blah blah blah. Well, great. They may have a bunch of friends who are hyper connected, and have some influence and share their posts. That doesn't mean it works for everybody. SEO, in my opinion, is done right. And Ian, you talked about the volatility of the ranking factors and things like that. What isn't really been volatile is that if you do all of the right things in concert with one another, that works over time.
Yeah.
Today it may be, an
it's
emphasis
a force
on
multiplier.
Yeah, exactly. Today there may be an emphasis on internal link quality throughout your website. Tomorrow it may be reviews get a bump up. But if you're doing them all together as a force multiplier, as Ian kindly pointed out, I think you're not gonna go wrong with that. If you're doing the right things, you're not doing any hinky things, you're not playing these games, you're not taking risks, you're just doing a really great job of creating content and integrating all of this things, the other things that we've talked about together.
Yeah. And I think it's good just to kind of springboard off of what you said, Ken. A business owner has to understand that online we as consumers, and you're a consumer whether you're listening to this as well as a business owner, right? Is that consumer behavior has changed dramatically in the last 15, 20 years, right? We have become absolute online researchers. All the data shows that people do not call a business generally or on average until they've done a certain amount of online research. It just makes sense, right? You're trying to figure out who is the best company to help me with X. And we have it at our fingertips. And so your online presence or the online marketplace is essentially kind of the truest form of capitalism in its positive nature, in that you have the opportunity to outcompete your greatest competitors, and your business does not exist in a bubble. It exists in a marketplace that you have some control over, and probably more control than even a physical space, because you can't quickly optimize a physical space by putting it somewhere else really quickly, right? But you can do some really big things on your online presence that can dramatically increase the amount of business that you attract, engage, and convert. And I think that's really what gets me excited about SEO and the return on investment. Man, sometimes we split out return on investment for our clients who really want to dig into the data. Meaning we look at, okay, what's your total investment for organic results that we're creating for you? What's your total return on investment for advertising that we're doing for you? And the return on investment for organic outperforms ads hundreds to thousands folds every time. Sometimes it takes a while to get to that point, but if you're investing consistently in SEO, it will outperform advertising every day, all day, because again, you're creating this snowball effect where it keeps gaining speed and momentum and energy that will help your business. So invest.
It does take time though. And
Yep.
So if you procrastinate, if you agonize and you don't take action, you're giving your competitors love you because you're giving the opportunity to them. So there's a cost that you have to put to inaction when it comes to addressing your SEO. And if you really want to be found when people are doing local searches, you've got to make that investment. You can't get started soon enough.
Ken, when I first started my business 8 years ago, one of the first blog posts I ever wrote was the hidden cost of waiting for SEO, right? Like the longer you wait, the more it hurts you. Absolutely.
And keep in mind, you're doing business in a time where your prospects have grown up in a digital world.
Yep.
Yellow Pages doesn't exist. Well, I guess it exists online, but they're going to go online in some in some way, shape, or form, and that's where they're going to find you. And if you don't have that online presence, and this goes back to SEO and organic search, you may not even be found. And if you're not found, you will never have the chance to do business with that prospect.
And your customers will.
Yep. The business is going somewhere. Might as well go to you.
That's right. So I think there's a good place to wrap up. Ken, Ian, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks to our audience for joining us today. If you found this valuable, share it with other businesses who could benefit from it. And Ian, take us out.
Until next week, folks, keep calm and market on.